Welcome back. I'm writer Andrea Page, and I'm having a conversation tonight with my good friend, Sibby Falk. And Sibby and I belong to a writers group, a local writers group called Rochester Area Children's Writers and Illustrators. And we are both teachers also. So welcome, Sibby. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. This is fun.
So how about we start off with just having you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and maybe what kind of genre you'd like to write?
Well, I think I've always been a writer. Even as a little kid, I was so pulled into books and so pulled into reading, and I think the writing naturally followed from all of that reading. I was lucky enough to have been born to parents who were huge readers, and my mom supported that by taking my brothers and I to the library every week. So we'd take our little red wagon and walk down a few blocks to the library and load it up with books and go home and read all those and repeat the process the next week. And I can still remember so much about that. The smell of the children's library was downstairs, and there was just this wonderful smell of, I don't know, adventure and possibility when you walked into that room. So it was, I was very lucky to have had those experiences. And then later on, when I became a teacher, I was an elementary school teacher, and I was teaching fourth grade, and I always wrote things for my students. I wrote poetry, and I wrote a play for my students every year, which we would perform for the parents, and that was usually connected to either history or some sort of literature. I remember actually writing a play which you attended, Andrea, called In a New York Minute, and Donald Trump was the lead character.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, who knew? Fast forward.
The play, but I didn't remember that.
Yeah, he was the narrator of the play, so who knew? Fast forward, we'd be where we are today. But in teaching social studies to my students, I realized that they weren't loving history the way that I did. And I couldn't seem to get them connected to the subject matter. So I started writing what I called study stories, which were these very short stories which included, well, let's say they had a chapter test coming up. So I'd take the things that they needed to know for that chapter test, but then I'd make up a family, and I would have the family go through some sort of an experience where all of these facts came in, and I would share the story with my students, and we'd act the story out, and then my test scores went right through the roof because
so awesome.
Yeah, when the kids were sitting there taking their tests, you could see them, kind of think for a minute, and they'd be replaying the story, and then they'd write their answer down. So I thought, hey, I think I got something here, and that's when I started to write mid-grade historical fiction.
And you had a sabbatical, too, from your school district, right?
Yeah, I taught in Fairport Central School District, and in 2001, I believe, I received a sabbatical for a year. And I got to stay home for the entire year at my full teacher salary and write historical fiction because they knew that would support the fourth grade curriculum. And then those books were shared with all of the fourth grade teachers in Fairport. And now, luckily, because the books have been published, I have 3 historical fictions. They're in classrooms all across the country. And that was my whole inspiration for writing them. So I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. And I actually have some here. I don't have all 3 of the ones that I have. I couldn't find the one. I think I might have lent it to somebody. Was this your first one?
No, the one you don't have, Freedom's Fire, was my first one. And Freedom's Fire is about the American Revolution. It's about 4 families who have to, and there's a fourth grade age student in each of those 4 families. And each of the families has to decide what they're going to do because they can tell that they're leading up to some sort of confrontation. So, for example, James' father is a newspaper publisher in New York City, so he's all up on current events. Taipa is a member of the Wappinger Nation who lives near New York City, and they know that if a war happens, part of it will be fought on their territory. So they need to make a decision. Are they going to support the British or the Americans?
Oh, wow.
And then I have a Joe who is a slave in a manor on the Hudson River. And interestingly enough, back in those days, if you were a wealthy landowner, your children didn't have to go off to war. Your sons didn't have to go. You could send a slave in their place.
Oh my
And
God.
so Joe at age 10 was sent off to war in place of this rich landowner's son. And then finally Maggie, who is the daughter of a British soldier, and 30,000 troops were sent over to Staten Island to sort of send a message from King George that we, the colonies, better shape up. And her father was one of those soldiers. She and her mom followed them as in order to cook and care for the soldiers. So
amazing. And that one is from all the different points of view, and
yeah.
And just, listening to the little bits that you're saying, there's so much research and background that went into that book and all your other books and your stories and your plays. It's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Inspire me and my.
Oh, well, you inspire me right back, Andrea. So Mutual Admiration Society. And then Letty's North Star is a story again of about a 10-year-old girl who is living with her family on a plantation in Maryland, and her family of slaves. And her dad finally decides that it's time for them to try and get away from slavery. And unfortunately, the family is recaptured in a packet boat on the Erie Canal as they're making their way to Canada. But Letty is asleep, wrapped up in that quilt. She's asleep in her mom's lap. And when Dad realizes that they're going to be recaptured, he picks her up from Mom and he hides her between the barrels of corn and barley in the back of the boat. And they're all recaptured. She wakes up the next morning on this abandoned boat. Not even the captain of the boat is there because, of course, he's been arrested for having slaves on the boat. And she actually gets off the boat, and she is in the village of Fairport in 1825. And a couple of kids, Daniel and Rebecca, in the village of Fairport, run across her, and the three of them have to figure out how to get her the rest away to Canada. And there is a very controversial theory that there were codes in the quilts that slaves made. Controversial because some historians believe there is no way. I love telling this to kids because they get it right away. The historians say there's no way there were codes in those slave quilts because they were never written down. And as soon as I say that, the kids immediately say one of two things. Either, well, duh, you don't write down a secret, or the slaves weren't allowed to learn how to read and write. How could they write down a secret code if they didn't know how to write? So Letty has to follow the code in her quilt to make her way to Canada.
That's very, very cool. And the kids must just love reading about their little community.
Yes, yeah, and it was fun for me to do all of that research in a community that I had taught in for, at that point, probably 25 years. So that was exciting for me.
So cool. And I'll just share the other one that I have too is Council Fire, and I remember you working on this one too.
Yep. Andrea and I are in a critique group together, so she was in on the very beginning of a lot of this. Now, Council Fire was different for me, and this is really a good conversation to have with you because I'm not Native American. So this goes to a couple of issues. One, do we have the right to write about a culture if we're not part of that culture? Mm-hmm. And then secondarily, if you make the decision to go ahead and do that, as I did with Council Fire, and again, because I wanted my students to become interested in the topic, then I had to make sure that my research was absolutely on point. Mm-hmm. So I know I did. I did more research for Council Fire than for the other two books because I was so concerned about getting it right and about not being offensive to anyone who felt I didn't have the right to write that book.
Yeah, that's interesting take on that too. And I had the same, feelings about what I was writing about, even though I am Sioux, and my book is about the Sioux Code Talkers, but not having lived or experienced that particular life on a reservation. I've been to the reservation. I have family on the reservation. We visit there often. But when you don't live in a particular place, there are some nuances, I think, that maybe we don't pick up on.
And historical fiction is an interpretation of that time, and you're the one doing the writer is the one doing the interpretation. So research is crucial for that.
So, I mean, it sounds like you were trying to be empathetic to, that point of view, which you did that with your Freedom's Fire book too, with the different kinds of points of view.
And I think that's what writers of historical fiction or writers of history in general are empathetic to the cultures that they are describing, to the time periods they're describing. And it's an honor to write history, but a huge responsibility as well, which I'm sure you feel too.
Yes, lots of responsibility trying to get it, right for the audience. And hopefully, I mean, yes, that is one of my big worries. So
and especially for both of us, because our readers are, for the most part, children, elementary, mid-grade students. We are having an impact on what their picture will be of those people. So we absolutely need to get it right. Someone who is more informed might be able to read it and go, oh, no, that didn't happen. But if you're giving this to a reader who doesn't have very much information, you want to make sure that you're giving them the best you can.
And it sparks an interest for them to continue moving forward and learning about that society or that family or that, like the village of Fairport even. So yeah, that's so
I think that's where reading takes us in general is, when I read books outside of the genre of children, when I read books written for adult, I read a lot of women's fiction. I am transported as well too, and the same thing happens for me. I'll read something in a book and I'll think, is that really true? And then that leads me to look that up or have that conversation with someone. So it's one of the pleasures of reading.
And I get to experience the awe of what the children are learning too. Right now we're reading Long Walk to Water, Linda Sue Park's book in school, and the kids are starting to learn about their culture and how water really impacts what those roles are that they have in their society. And we see some of Salvador's videos that he has showing about the walk to water and the life expectancy rates
and when you think about the fact that there are women right now today whose entire purpose is getting up in the morning and walking for hours to bring back some sort of container of really dirty bacteria infested water to keep their family alive, and the very next day they and what do? We walk out into the kitchen and turn the faucet on.
Yeah, and I think for them, their eyes are wide open. Like,
yeah,
I just like looking at them while they're watching this short video, and they're all just like, and that's what reading does. I think, like, look at what you started off with. Your parents opened up that world to you by bringing you to the library, and oh my gosh, what a wonderful gift.
It was a wonderful gift, absolutely.
Turn around as a teacher and a writer to be able to pay it forward almost, and
we come across, and I know you have too in your teaching career, Andrea, we come across kids all the time who have not had that kind of exposure to reading. Kids who grow up in families where reading isn't important, or grow up in families where there's no expectation to do well at school or even attend school, grow up in families where books aren't even around. There just aren't any to be read. So we have tremendous responsibility as writers and as teachers to get the right book in the right hands.
Absolutely. And it's just, that's what makes my heart warm, when I see the kids really take to a book or poetry or whatever, they start off like, oh, and then by the end of it, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I really like this now. So that's what keeps me going in school. So then,
let me tell you one little story about a kid in Gates Chile. I got contacted, oh gosh, it must be 3 or 4 years ago now. And it was about council fire. And a teacher in Chile called me and said, I have a student in my classroom, 4th grade classroom, and he really struggles with reading, and he finished his first book ever last week, and it was Council Fire.
Oh my gosh.
And it just meant the world to me. So I said, oh, can I come and meet him? So I went over to his school and did an author visit for his class. And actually the newspaper picked it up, and there was a picture of him in the paper and a picture of Council Fire in the paper. And it was just such a full circle moment for me, because it kind of wrapped up my teaching and my writing all in one piece with this little guy. So that was a real privilege.
That's a cool story.
Yeah.
Very cool story. So you have some other books out that I don't have. I think you have 2 more that we didn't talk about, right?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I have a science book, and those. Yeah, you're smiling. Those are
I love science.
Those people who know me well know I'm not a science person. It's not that I'm not interested in it. I think I talked myself out of being able to understand science a really long time ago and sort of avoided it. The words chemistry and physics scare me. So I was actually out in my kayak one day, and those are the moments when we're, as writers, when we're doing something else, kind of mindless, like paddling a kayak, that's when inspiration can hit. And I was out in my kayak on the water, and I started thinking about my teaching career, and this idea popped into my brain. There was a year or several years when I was teaching 3rd grade, I believe, and there were 6 3rd grades, and we had 6 science units. And I got this great idea, if we each focus on one unit, instead of each of us trying to teach 6 units, each of us could teach our 1 unit 6 times. So we all got lab coats and carts, and 2 times a week, I think it was, we'd put our lab coats on and get our carts and go to somebody else's classroom, and they'd come to ours. And so the kids got all 6 units by 6 people who had become experts on that. And I was the matter person, solids, liquids, and gases. So I had developed this really cool unit, and I went back into my notes, which I'd saved. I don't know why, because I was retired at the time. But I went back into my notes on all of that, and that became a book for my 4th book, I guess, and it's called It Matters. And it is a whole series of science experiments that kids can do either in school with their teacher or at home with their parents, about learning about the matters, the properties of solids, liquids, and gases. So who knew that I could write science?
And I'm sure you shared your passion and enthusiasm for that particular subject matter, and the kids pick up on that too, and then they become excited and passionate about science.
Yeah, I think that I learned right along with my kids that science is fascinating and can actually be a whole lot of fun. Absolutely. So that's the message that book sends, along with a lot of information.
There's responsibility with doing science experiments, which, but I don't get to teach science anymore either. I'm just an English teacher now. So
not just, you are an English teacher. And then my 5th book is called Treehouse Rescue, and that's my first full fiction, and that was so much fun to write. I'm not exactly even sure where the inspiration for this story came, but I kind of wanted a mystery, and I've always been fascinated with tree houses. So there are 3 kids in a neighborhood. They don't have their own tree house, but there is an elderly couple that has a tree house in their backyard that the husband made. It was sort of his hobby, and he allowed all the kids in the neighborhood to come and play in the playhouse, and it was a very elaborate playhouse. And everybody loved it. Well, he passes away, and then the widow realizes that she has all these back taxes, and they're going to take her house and knock the house and the tree house down. So the 3 kids are now challenged about trying to figure out how they can save their tree house, and it leads to a mystery about the tree house owner's missing emerald necklace.
Oh my gosh.
Which if they could find it, will fund all of the back taxes.
Save the house
and save the house, right.
Nice.
And they are unsuccessful at they are successful, but that isn't the solution, and they have to come up with yet another solution. So even when you think you've got it all solved, sometimes you don't.
And was writing a mystery a little bit different than the other books?
Yes, because with the historical fiction and even the science book, I was relying on my research. So there was a bit of improvisation because I was making up some of the characters, but I wanted to make sure that this was based in fact. Now with Treehouse Rescue, I didn't have to do any sort of research. It was contemporary, so it was based in the year that I wrote it. And so there wasn't any research there. So it was really wide open, which was a whole lot of fun. So instead of spending my time researching, I was spending my time going, what if? What if they get on their bikes and this happens? Or what if they go over to this house and nobody's home? Or what if? So it was a whole lot of imagining and writing myself into a corner and then having to go, nope, that's not working, and backing up and trying again. So yeah, I would do that again for sure.
So do you have a tree house?
No. And no, I've never had a tree house, actually. I think when we were kids, there was a little woods close by, and we made our version of a tree house, which was probably, an old rotten piece of plywood and a hunk of rope, and that was our our version. But no, I've never had a real one.
Oh my gosh. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think, your background lent yourself into going through your first few books, and then you talked about your science connection, and then this freeing activity of, creating a mystery from scratch, basically. What other things or who in your life maybe inspired you to start writing? Well, you talked about your parents, but continuing this writing is a hard job. Well,
yeah, I was thinking about that earlier today when I was thinking about talking with you this evening, and I really believed when I got my contract for my first book, which, by the way, took 39 different publishing houses. So it was my 39th publisher that said yes. So winding my way through all of those rejections, and you know how that goes. Those are very difficult to take. I honestly thought that when I got my first contract, I was golden, that I would just sit back and the offers would come and any book I wrote would get published. And I soon found out that that is not the case. And I receive rejections all the time, and try to use them as inspiration and energy to keep going on the project, which it's not always easy. That takes a while. I mean, it would be very easy to kind of get whiny and say, nobody wants my stuff and I'm never going to publish another book, and why me? But what you really have to do is to just say, okay, that was the wrong person for this project, and I'm just going to keep sending it out. It's a combination of the right publisher at the right time with the right project, which is sort of a magical formula that takes a while to find. Yeah.
It has to be like the perfect storm where it all comes together. Yeah.
I remember a long time ago, I listened to a speaker who said that the formula for him was to be working on something, have something going out to be considered, have something else coming back to be looked at, and just this circle of constant manuscripts in, manuscripts out, instead of sending one manuscript out and then sitting there on your hands waiting to hear. So that he's just constantly in motion and working on the next thing.
Yeah.
Which is not always easy to do either.
It's not, and you have to keep those ideas coming. And it sounds like you get ideas when you're out, like you said, doing the other things. Inspiration comes to you in different ways. So that's awesome. Your whole trail of your journey was awesome.
Yeah, and it continues to be. I want to quote Jane Yolen, who I'm proud to say is now a friend. You and I worked together on the Rochester Children's Book Festival, and having done that has allowed me to meet some of my true just idols in the industry. And so Jane Yolen and I have become friends, and her phrase, which I'm sure she would be fine with me sharing because she shares it all the time at SCBWI meetings, which is the Society for Children Book Writers and Illustrators, our national society. And her phrase is BIC, which is butt in chair. And Another thing that she says is that writers write and everybody else is just pretending. So being able to put your butt in the chair and write every single day, even if it's just for 10 minutes, and we're all busy, you with your teaching career, and you're a marathon runner and family and all the other things that are pulling at you, you still find a way and a time to get your writing in. And I don't succeed at that every day, but that's my goal, is to get my butt in that chair every single day for a period of time. And some days the writing just flows out of me, and other days I sit and stare at the screen and think, whoa.
Well, I think we all go through that. And you're super busy too. I was hoping I would be able to squeeze this in somewhere, but you are a fabulous quilter as well. And
thank you.
I hope sometime soon your quilts will be a part of your writing career there.
Well, I'm hoping to. I've written a picture book, and it's kind of a difficult book to present to publishers because it's a picture book about body image. So it's a very mature topic in a young children's format, because I have heard kids as young as 5 and 6 who look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm too fat. And I think it's imperative that we start sending a message to kids that it's not about the package, it's about how you treat other people and how you move through the world that's important. Mm-hmm. So I have, the reason I'm connecting this to your conversation about quilts is that this is my first effort at illustrating, and I have illustrated this picture book, which is not out, it's not been purchased, it's just still making the rounds. But I've illustrated it with quilts, so it's 32 pages, each page a different quilt, which was a joy to make. And yeah, hopefully someday it'll get out.
Unique and beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I had the pleasure of making a quilt for your efforts back a few years ago.
It's upstairs. I should have had that out. Oh.
That's okay.
Oh, darn.
Oh, it's pretty.
Do this again.
You can put a picture of it next to, the click button for this.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I've been saving it. It's coming out soon because, there's going to be a lot of, hopefully.
Yeah. And I would just like to say that tomorrow is a rather special day for you, young lady. What would tomorrow be?
It's the release of my first book. Yay!
Which is?
Sioux Code Talkers of World War II. And when I post this recording, it might actually be tomorrow. Got to see where it lands in the timeline here of what I'm doing. So
okay.
So it might not be tomorrow. It's March 1st.
March 1st. Your book is dropping March 1st. And we are all of us who have watched your journey through this book. We're so proud of you and so excited for this book release. This is beyond cool.
It's an amazing feeling to finally get here to this finish line. And it's really not a finish line. It's kind of just keeping moving forward to the next, race, basically. So. Do you
feel it's like a little bit of a pinch me moment?
Absolutely. I'm pinching myself every day.
Have you held the book in your hands yet?
No. Not held one in I'm waiting for that baby still. I know.
When are they coming?
I don't know. Every day I run home from work and I go to the front door to see if it's on the porch.
Oh, I remember when Freedom's Fire was coming out, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. We had moved. We had moved from our old home to our new home with about 40 miles in between the two houses, and they sent my publisher sent my copies of my book to the wrong house.
Oh, no.
And they sent it back to the publisher. So I had to wait for all of that to, wow. Had to wait for it to finally find me. But that was a pretty cool day too.
Yeah. It's been a wonderful journey. I just, I'm going to wrap this up here, and I'm just, enjoyed this conversation and hearing all of what you have done to get where you are. And I really am thankful that you were very truthful, as you always are, in sharing your fears and your emotions and the important concerns that you have for the children that are our audience. And, you have such passion and your successes are going to continue. I know.
Oh, right back at you. I'm so excited for you and so glad that I know you. I mean, this relationship has been, we don't get to see each other often enough, but this relationship has just meant the world, I think, to both of us.
Yep.
And to be able to be in this incredible community of writers that Rackway is, and to know that we can reach out a hand to someone like Linda Sue Park or Vivian Vandeveld or Ellen Stoll Walsh or Robin Pulver or MJ Out. You know, we've got all of these people who are very well published, who are just so generous and kind, and that's been a true support, I think, for both of us. Marcia Hales is another name that comes to mind, of people who you send them an email and boom, you get an email right back with an answer to your question. So,
and all great models of grace in this
yes,
publishing, profession that we're choosing to do. So it's
yeah, good. Going back to Jane Yolen, who I was talking about before, she posts on Facebook every couple of weeks about her rejections that she's received. And this is a woman who's published 350 books, and she still gets rejections all the time. And so, I mean, you could take that one way and think, oh, if she gets rejections, I'm not even going to try. But I think the message that you need to take is, she, at her level, gets rejections and just says, okay, onward.
And send it back out.
Yeah.
Get your butt in the chair and send it back out.
Yeah, she tells the story of a book that she wrote 10 years ago that just came out last year. It took that long for it to find its home.
That perfect storm again.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You're so welcome. This was fun.
Yeah, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, and I will see you for dinner on Thursday.
All right. Well, this is writer Andrea Page signing off. Thank you, Sibby Falk, for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.